Hey everybody, John Ray here, and today we're going to be talking about how you can become better at manifestation by tuning into your authentic self, by learning about a really interesting book called The Nature of Personal Reality. The concepts that we're going to be talking about today are going to help you anchor in your belief that you can actually shift reality by changing what's inside of you, your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions. And of course, the reason that I always start with the sunglasses is because we have to take off the facade. We have to take off the fake version of us and become as real as we can become in order to become these power manifestors that have a tangible impact over how reality renders in our life. The reason that I always start with the sunglasses is because we have to it looks like we're live and the audio is good to go, so I appreciate everybody that's tuned in on YouTube and on Twitter. This book, I've got two covers here. You may have seen this cover right here. It's called The Nature of Personal Reality: Specific Practical Techniques for Solving Everyday Problems and Enriching the Life That You Know. And this is written by Jane Roberts. She was a channel and a psychic and a mystic in the 60s, and her husband used to transcribe all of these different messages that she brought through from this entity Seth, and Seth was basically an oversoul that had access to all kinds of interesting ideas about how your thoughts, beliefs, and emotions shape reality and the experiences that you have. And so there's a whole series of Seth books that was put out by Jane Roberts and her husband Robert Buds, and these books essentially give you a cosmology that, you know, before Abraham Hicks, before The Secret, before all the law of attraction work, this was a cosmology and an understanding of how reality was actually way more subjective in nature than objective, and how you could have a tangible impact on that by shifting your thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. So we're going to dive into a few things that will probably challenge a conventional, objective, scientific, or materialist view of reality. Likely, if you're attracted to this type of content, you're already deep down this rabbit hole. So we'll look at how consciousness works, how consciousness, overlaps in a Venn diagram with other people in our lives, and essentially how we can activate the largest portion of our human potential that is possible. I'm going to be going through, as I've been writing in the margins of this book and highlighting things, I've taken my notes and put those into ChatGPT, had all of the core concepts organized around this, and I'm going to be sharing some of my own experiences of using these various methods for engaging with reality, for rendering reality in a new way. And we'll talk about if we were able to have a tangible impact on reality, if we do live in some kind of a consciousness simulation, what would be the underpinnings of that concept that would allow us to actually engage those principles in a more meaningful way and get more of the life and the things that we want, not just material things, but the emotional states that we want. And ultimately, as we've talked about in many videos on this channel, true abundance is knowing what you need to know when you need to know it. If you know what to do in each moment, you're going to be golden, and you're going to go on a very satisfying adventure of what Abraham Hicks used to call the breadcrumb path. So Esther Hicks and the entity that they channel, Abraham, have referenced Seth and Jane Roberts many times because there's a lot of similarities in this work. And the biggest similarity is that thoughts create things. Thoughts create your reality. And Seth teaches that, reality is not this tangible, touchable place that we think it is. Any of us who have gone down the rabbit hole of string theory or vibration or electric universe theory or any of these kind of fringe methods of exploring physics recognize that there's so much distance between the electron and the neutron in an atom. It's something like 70 to 90% of the atom is actually empty space, and it's actually vibrational forces that create the illusion of physicality. And what Seth proposes in this book, The Nature of Personal Reality, is that the way that physical illusion comes together. The way that we render reality as an experience is directly relational to our beliefs, to our conscious and unconscious thoughts, and all of those things, our emotions directly relate to how things show up in our lives. Which side of a person do we get? You know, I've had many experiences in the past where somebody will say, "Oh, you don't want to work with them. You know, they're always mean. They're always an a-hole." And I have always had a belief that, well, I always get the 1 out of 99 times that somebody is really nice. I always get them at their best. People always show up and they give me the benefit of the doubt. I always end up in the right place at the right time with the right people because I've consistently practiced that. And so even if somebody historically on the bell curve of that person is an a-hole or shows up as a brat or isn't usually useful, I almost always, when I'm in alignment, get people at their best, and they show up and in such meaningful ways. And this is a co-creation that I have with all of the people in my life. You know, when you think about the avatar, the spiritual avatars that get the most attention, and you think about the cartoon version of somebody who's like a Jesus Christ who's walking, and animals are just walking up to them, flowers are opening as they walk down the path. It's because there's such a purity in their vision and in the love in their consciousness that things naturally transform and lean and have reality has a bias towards that particular consciousness that they carry. Now, if you're somebody who's happy-go-lucky and you believe that things are going to work out for you and you have some kind of a mystical understanding of the world, then you delight in going around and exploring new opportunities and finding reasons to dive down every rabbit hole that you can, because you recognize that you're the type of person where reality just shows its best to you. But if you're always complaining, if you're always blaming other people, if you never take personal responsibility, if you think that the world is out to get you, if you think rich people are trying to destroy you, these are all belief systems that ultimately are going to prove themselves out to you. And nowhere is this more apparent than in our current modern society, because we live in an information age where you can literally prove anything to yourself. It doesn't mean that you're going to be able to prove it to anybody else, but you will be able to build a very solid belief system and an emotional attachment to that belief system that you can convince yourself is wholly rooted in fact, even though it may or may not be. And then what we have to address is, well, if reality is subjective, if there is no true objective reality, and we all have this personal universe bubble that we're walking around in, how do we know what's real, and is anything real? And I think part of the fun of being a mystic and interpreting reality in this way is that you have to take 100% personal responsibility for literally everything that you perceive. And that can be something that if you're not ready to do that deep spiritual shadow work, you don't want to do. Because almost always when people start down the law of attraction, spiritual manifestation rabbit hole, they want to take credit for all of the good things that happen on their journey, and any of the bad things that happen on their journey, they don't want to admit that, well, if I'm the person that's creating and attracting the good things, they don't want to admit that I must be the person that's attracting and creating all the bad things as well. And reality is a mirror in that way, that is constantly showcasing your soul condition or the error that you have in your nervous system, in your spirit body and in your soul. And it is giving you relational information that helps you go deeper down the mystical rabbit hole and recognize where you're not taking full personal responsibility for your life. And as we'll see, this goes much deeper than just the physical actions that you're taking. You need to take responsibility for everything that you see on the news. You need to take responsibility for anything that you see on your timeline, because if you're perceiving it, that means that you created a reality that brought that information into it. It doesn't mean that you're wholly responsible for that, but you're certainly responsible for some of the energy being lent to it, because where attention goes, energy flows. And if you're perceiving something, then you are lending energy to it. And so part of personal responsibility at the level of a mystic is recognizing that if you're giving your attention to something in any way, even if you then say, I don't like that, you have to ask yourself, why did I attract it in the first place? Why was my attention drawn to that? Why haven't I pruned my emotional body and my thinking in such a way where I didn't have such a visceral reaction to that? And really what we're looking for is the ability to look at things without being emotionally triggered by them. And when we can do that, then we are no longer giving as much energy to it. You know, the hilarious thing in our politically charged culture wars is that every time you get really angry and push against something and protest against something and label something as bad, or label a group of people as bad, or think that your thinking is better than someone, you're giving the opinion that you don't like all of the energy to keep thriving. You know, in reality transurfing, they call this feeding the pendulum. Your attention on a thing, even when you don't like it, feeds that thing. And so you make the thing that you don't like stronger. And this is a part of you taking personal responsibility for literally everything that you perceive, because your emotional and energetic reaction to the things in your lives determine whether they grow in your life or subside in your life. And a big part of our job as conscious creators is to properly tend to and prune the garden of our thoughts and emotions. And that means having a deep responsibility for what you're thinking, why you're thinking, the feelings that are coming up, owning those feelings, not projecting them forward as blame, and really understanding that the more that you do this, the more that reality will render itself in such a way that matches the pruning that you're doing to the garden of your beliefs and emotions. So Seth taught that beliefs are these fundamental building blocks, and your emotional response to your own beliefs, what you believe about yourself, what you believe about money, what you believe about your health, what you believe about your parents, what you believe about the workforce, what you believe about the government, anything that we actively are believing is against us is ultimately we're going to prove that to ourselves. And so this is why having a nuanced perspective on reality, especially when it comes to culture war items, which is what so many people get caught up in, especially in an election year, when you're looking at something like politics, one, you have to decide, well, if I'm creating reality at a consciousness level, why are politics even relevant? And if it's relevant because you're trying to fine-tune your thinking about what solutions are, then you have to use all of the oppositional energy to recognize where there's an opportunity to actually solve something. And a big issue is just, if you see something that you don't like, you have to feel your big feelings about it. And as you feel through the discomfort that you have about that, you will be healing your part in creating the thing that you don't like. Because when you're triggered by something, that's a dead-on indicator that you're contributing more energy to the creation of that thing you don't like than you initially thought, than you want to. We should be able to make our own decisions about what things mean to us and not have meanings blasted on us because we have some kind of an emotional injury towards something. And so when we can look at our timeline without being triggered, without getting angry, that showcase that we're in the right emotional balance and that we have the right belief system around life and all of the events in life that allows us to be most profound in our ability to render reality and to have a tangible impact on reality. This isn't about ignoring political issues or issues that are important to large groups of people. However, one person that is in alignment is going to be infinitely more effective than a million people that are out of alignment. And when we can, part of what prayer is being able to hold the vision of an ideal timeline. We'll get into timelines in a bit, but it's basically a parallel reality, a simulation, so to speak, that we're calling in to engage as the core reality, as the reality that we walk around in. And the more that we can consistently hold that that vision and have a belief system that we're calling that vision in, the more that we will usher in the world that we want to see just from the state of consciousness. But every time we look at what's happening in the world, and we say, ooh, that doesn't match the vision, we're actually giving energy to what is. And this is why reality creation as a concept, in order for us to be a conscious manifester, a wizard, you have to be very good at seeing something in your mind as a visionary and not letting what's right in front of you wreck that vision, not let it throw you off emotionally, not let it present to you with doubt. And so this is one of the beautiful things about prayer, is that if you do believe in something higher than yourself, whether that be a higher explanation of reality, like we're talking about now, or a God that actually creates reality, or your co-creative ability to create reality with a God, that personally, that's what I believe, is that we have a co-creation with an entity outside of us that is perfected in love, that I call God. And when we use some of these principles, we're operating within the physics that God created as a way to make the world a better place and to bring heaven onto earth. And so our belief system about everything is contributing to the things that we either want or don't want. And so every time we see something that we don't want, the Abraham Hicks response to that would be, oh, good, now I know what I do want. Because if I know what I don't want, I can more clearly articulate what I don't want. And so this is a process that's called pivoting, where you say, okay, well, I don't want that. I don't like the way that I feel around that. So you sit with yourself. You feel your big feelings about whatever you're feeling until you can look at that thing that initially triggered you and have some nuance on it, have it not be so triggering, have it be to the place where you can actually form your own idea about that rather than having the patterned emotions within you form the idea. And now you can say, what would actually be the greatest thing that could happen here? What would serve the most amount of people? And you can become a visionary that comes up with a solution that serves all sides of a problem. And then you steal your focus. You hold that in your mind. You walk around in that as a simulation in your mind. You project your astral body into that simulation as you walk around into the new vision that was inspired by the thing that you don't want. And this allows you to develop a belief system that future vision is possible. And you will start to call, consciously and unconsciously, the people, places, and things to bring that about. Now, you may not even be aware of how all of those dots get connected. It may be that a year down the road, those things get resolved. And I used to call this the thank God they invented such and such phenomenon, because all the times I will have a vision of something that I want shifted at a global level in the world that will allow more people to engage with joy and success and health. And I will just hold the vision that something is going to show up to be able to give those people that enhancement of life. And it never fails that as I pay attention and as I continue to hold that vision, I see pockets of reality starting to take up the vision and snowball and spiral. And then I see opportunities when they're there for me to be called into service, to be a part of the way that reality renders. Because a big part of reality is that this is a learning ground. This is for us to individuate who we are as a soul being and to recognize our deepest passions and desires and enact them. This is a playground. It's not supposed to be something that we have to slog through. It's not designed for us to have to work off a bunch of karma. Karma is an in-the-moment thing. And when we learn how to address our belief systems in the moment and the emotions that are attached to those belief systems, we can have a very profound impact on the world around us and how the people in our lives and beyond show up. So this gets into one of the primary premises of The Nature of Personal Reality by Jane Roberts, and that is the power of your thoughts and emotions, and that these things are creative forces. You know, if you're an artist, you recognize that you hold a vision in your mind and you get excited about that vision, and then you use your technical expertise to translate that vision into whatever medium your art is. And what this book proposes is that all of reality is your canvas. That is your world. And what you perceive is specifically the thing that you have the most impact on. if we dive into some of the quantum theory that's been available to us and that is regarded as good, solid science since the early 1900s, we know that in the quantum world, there's all kinds of wonky things going. And one of the things that they talk about is, everything that you're not perceiving doesn't actually exist in that moment. The same way that if you're playing a video game, the thing that's being rendered is just the part of the video game that's on the screen. Everything that you don't see isn't being rendered. They're not rendering the entire video game world all at once, because that would be a poor use of processing power. And the universe is as efficient as it can be. And so it's only rendering reality through the consciousness that is perceiving it, and it's only showcasing what's being perceived. It's not actually rendering anything else. And so our thoughts and emotions, as we pivot the frame to the right or pivot the frame to the left, our thoughts and emotions are determining how reality is going to render the way that we perceive that and the way that we can show up in that next frame that gets rendered. And there's all kinds of techniques and practices that you can use to learn the power of your thought and focus. Neville Goddard used to have a technique called the knot technique. And let me wipe my nose because I'm getting sweaty. The knot technique that Neville Goddard used to teach was basically this idea that he would say, I want you to fall asleep every single night, and I want you to envision yourself climbing a ladder. And as you fall asleep climbing that ladder, just see yourself going up the rungs of the ladder, and you're climbing this ladder. But then the rest of the day, put notes everywhere that says, I will not climb a ladder. I will not climb a ladder. I will not climb a ladder. And what he was teaching is that there's no such thing as a negative phrase in the universe. If you've ever played around with ChatGPT and ChatGPT does something, and then you say, no, don't do that. Well, ChatGPT isn't good at recognizing the word don't. It isn't good at recognizing the word not. And so oftentimes the thing that you say not to do, it ends up including in the prompt. Same with Midjourney, where you say, hey, draw me a picture of a guy not wearing a tie, but make sure he's not wearing a tie. Well, almost always you're going to get a guy wearing a tie rendered because it's not good at perceiving those negative articles. And reality is the same way. The more that you say not, the more that it thinks that you're calling that in because you're giving attention to it. And so the not technique is saying, I'm not going to climb a ladder. I'm not going to climb a ladder. But before you go to sleep, you envision yourself climbing a ladder. And almost everybody that goes through this process for a week or longer ends up in a weird situation in reality where they have to climb a physical ladder. When's the last time you climbed a ladder? For me, it was the last time I did this experiment, actually, where I ended up climbing a ladder in the new house that we moved into. But you may have never climbed a ladder before, and if you run this experiment, what Neville Goddard was showcasing is that you, through your reticular activating system, through your ability to render the world around you, will put yourself in a situation where you have to climb a ladder, and it will be an impulsive thing where you're not actively seeking it out. It just kind of happens, and you're climbing it before you even realize that you are. And so this showcases that when we have strong focus on something, when we fall asleep with a vision in our head, when we actively practice the world that we want to see and the type of person that we want to be in that future world, then reality will serve us with opportunities that act as a breadcrumb path for us to actualize that reality. But it doesn't mean that you're going to call in the entire desired reality experience all at once, because likely you don't have a nervous system that's capable of handling that type of situation yet. Otherwise, you would already have it. And so what reality does is it very slowly starts to render things for you that will upgrade your nervous system, upgrade your thinking, and develop the skill sets that are required for you to bring about the reality that you want. The joyous part of doing it consciously in this way instead of unconsciously, though, is that ultimately you will have an experience where you feel like, I'm in the right place. I'm with the right people. It's the right time. You'll have a much deeper confidence in the process, and it will be easier for you to perceive and pick out all of the dots that are meant for you, so that you're not wasting all of this time on a path that doesn't go where you want to go. This is about there being millions of potential choices that you could take in each moment, and you knowing exactly what the most optimal and efficient and effective choice for you is in each moment. And that's how you collapse time and create reality. It's ultimately about you stringing your thoughts together in the right way. And the more that you have conscious intention around how you're working with your thoughts and emotions, the more that you're feeling your big feelings instead of projecting them forward as discomfort, the more that you're owning any projection you have or blame that you have, and instead saying, okay, well, I know I don't want that to happen. What is it that I do want? And then basking in the joy of how cool it would be if you could bring that about and be a part of bringing that about, and then becoming the type of person that brings those things about. This is where reality all around you is just going to delight you. And you can play around with all kinds of things to prove this out to you. You know, if you're going to a restaurant, before you go to that restaurant, just envision what a good meal it's going to be, how good the service is going to be, that you're going to get there and you're going to get the best table in the house, and everybody's going to be such a delight to talk to, and some of the food is going to be comped, and you're going to have such a good conversation with the friends that you're going. You just... It takes like 3 minutes. Do it in the car while you're driving there. And what will happen is that maybe it doesn't happen the first time, but as you consistently practice this type of visualization, you're building this kind of simulated prompt that seeds these ideas into the way that reality shows up, into the impulses that the people around you have. You know, we think that every thought that we think is our own thought, but oftentimes we're influenced by all kinds of biases and perceptions and emotions and content, and manipulated at unconscious levels and inspired at unconscious levels. And so one of the levels that I believe we receive impulse and creative impulse at is the level where we receive the consciousness input from other people. So when you pray for someone, what you're doing is you're essentially hanging an idea over the satellite of their brain, and it's not voodoo. You're not forcing them to choose something. You're just putting that thought, the radio wave of that thought, into closer proximity of them, so that they, through their free will, can choose that. You know, if you've ever... Because I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic, I've hung out with a bunch of dark people who are trying to dig themselves out of a hole. And one of the things that was very useful to me as I was coming out of that hole myself, and that I now practice when I'm helping others come out of that hole, is it's very difficult to tell somebody in that place that's in a super depressive place, that's addicted to chemicals, that doesn't actually have a desire to get off of them, but knows that their life is pulling apart. It's very hard to give that person a hand up and to pull them up, or have them pull themselves up by their bootstraps. This is where prayer can be incredibly effective, because what a good prayer is seeing that person in their highest potential. And we can be praying for everyone that we come into contact with. We can be praying, this is what visualization is. We can be segment intending, as Abraham Hicks would call it, every single section of our lives. And when there's somebody in our lives that we want to help, but we don't know how, all we have to do is recognize, well, what are their highest desires? What is it that they actually want to achieve? And then we visualize that person as getting that. We don't have to know how they're going to get it. We just see them in that end state where, wow, they got their stuff together. They're working on a job that they actually that they absolutely love. That physical ailment just cleared right up, and the doctors called it a miracle, and everyone around them is celebrating, and they feel like they're starting to have like a grasp on how to really succeed in reality. And you're building out this vision for them. You don't ever have to have a conversation with them. What you're doing is you're building a vision for them. This is a thought simulation. It's a thought cluster that then gets projected to them telepathically, where that thought cluster is now within the realm of their ability to perceive. So before, they weren't at a frequency to even get on to the radio wave that would have an idea that was that uplifting. But when you pray for them and when you visualize using your thought, when you get into the emotional state of them having the thing that they want, what you're doing is you're creating a really potent radio wave that they will maybe be able to pick up on. Now, it's up to them. They have to actually want the thing that you're visualizing for them. But if they want it, if there's something within them that resonates at a desire and passion basis for the thing that you're helping them envision, they will telepathically tap into that idea. It's going to translate for them into whatever the next step they can take is towards that vision. They may not even be able to perceive the whole vision, but what they will get is a breadcrumb path. They will get the next step. And if you're a drug addict that's strung out and dehydrated, the next right step might be, I'm going to go and drink some water. And you weren't going to do that. You were going to just let yourself die. But for some reason, you were like, screw it. I'm going to go drink some water. This is the power of prayer. Prayer isn't this thing that magically converts that person into a Jesus believer who no longer does drugs. Prayer is you visualizing an ideal outcome for someone, knowing that you're in co-creative relationship with the universe and God as a whole, and that thought cluster will now be concentrated in the vicinity of the person that you're praying for so that they can tap into that idea. Well, the same thing applies when we're praying for ourselves. We want to be praying through visualization. We want to build our own thought cluster because essentially we have this brain. It's a satellite dish that taps into the information in our field, but our field is then a satellite dish that taps into the quantum potential, to the cosmic lattice of the universe, and to the ultimate intelligence of God in the universe. And so the more that we build out a vision for ourselves, we're consciously using our thoughts, and we're getting really excited about our vision. We're starting to believe that it's possible for us. What we're doing is we're strengthening our satellite dish and our ability to tap into that breadcrumb path, which is the next step for us. If you're trying to solve a problem, the next step for you is the insight that says, that's how I should do it. And I want to reiterate that this is not some woo-woo thing where your whole life just changes overnight. The way that I use manifestation is a focusing of my brain to tap in to the next most optimal step that I can take. So if I have a problem that I'm trying to solve for, or something on my task list that needs to be done, and I don't quite know how to do it, what I can do is I can say, well, what is the desired outcome that I want here? And so that desired outcome might be that I want to have a really nice time with my girlfriend, and for us to have a juicy, delicious conversation about something that's meaningful to both of us, that connects us at a deeper heart level, so that we can grow our love, and instead of being so focused on the pettiness and things that we don't like about each other, we can be focused on the things that bring us closer together. And we can allow each other to have their own experience by knowing that we have this connective tissue between us. So what I'm doing is I'm building out a vision for what I want that relationship to look like. And then I'm going to dinner. I'm taking whatever the next step is. Maybe I'm suggesting something to my girlfriend. Maybe it makes me just want to send a love text message to her, or to write her a note. All of these things begin a snowball effect that ultimately manifests as me having an incredible relationship with my girlfriend. But if I hadn't done that work, that pre-paving work, to use my thoughts and emotions to visualize what I want, to have intention about what I want that relationship to be, what ends up happening in relationships? If you've been in a relationship long term, you know what the tendency is. You start to nitpick. You start to notice more the things you don't like than the things that you do like. You get into habits where you're just going through the motions and you're not making an effort anymore. You don't make anything special. There's no novelty in the relationship anymore. Well, that's you creating by default. That's you unconsciously building the relationship that you have. You're focusing on all of those things, and that's ultimately building out the simulation that acts as the satellite dish that connects you into the ideas that then results in an argument with your partner. If you had more powerfully created a vision of what you do want. And I try to do this at least once a week for my partner and I. Not that I even have this conversation with her, although sometimes we do because it naturally comes up. But once a week, I try to just at the top of a sheet of a legal pad, what do I want my relationship with my partner to be? And then I just write out what the ideal relationship is. I'm retuning my satellite dish to be able to see the breadcrumb path that ultimately will bring about the actions and the ideas and the insight that will allow me to continue to grow my love for my partner. Now, you can apply this same technique to what does it feel like to have wealth? What do I want my finances to look like? What do I want my work relationships to look like? You give vision, you become the conscious creator. And there's a great book called Psycho-Cybernetics that kind of dovetails with the nature of personal reality. And in Psycho-Cybernetics, it talks about how, when you have computer-guided missiles or planes that fly on autopilot, the most important thing for you to do is to set the destination. That's the ultimate vision of where you're going. The guided system is going to pivot you and move you and move around all of the bad weather. You have to keep focusing on where is the end destination. And if you do that, your brain is so good at making micro adjustments that are going to naturally just turn your head towards the information that you need. It's going to inspire you to take the course that you need. You're going to have a conversation with a friend that gives you the impulse to do something. And so instead of it feeling like a slog, which oftentimes in hustle harder culture where they're not utilizing this pre-intention work, it's like, okay, well, the way that you create the life that you want is you just will it into being. And whether you want to get up and do it or not, you do these steps, X, Y, and Z, and don't worry about your intuition. You just do these steps and you're modeling the way somebody else did it. And yes, if you hustle harder, you will 100%, and you follow that system to a T, you will 100% get the thing that you're trying to create. But you will hate it. You will end up resenting the things that you're creating unless it's aligned with a higher vision. So the part that gets left out so often is that all of these gurus that are teaching hustle harder, their vision is that they want to be a thought leader. Their vision is that they want to have a tangible impact on reality. Their vision is that they want to naturally be a voice for the things that they're passionate about. That's their vision. And without that vision, if they were just following the steps, it wouldn't be as fun and it wouldn't be as interesting. And so they wouldn't keep up with the practice. The vision is the most important thing. And then if you feel inspired to do the hustle harder stuff, I feel like I'm somebody who works very hard, who has a lot of irons and a lot of different fires and does a pretty good job of managing it all. However, I have a vision for all of those things that makes it feel like a joy to me, that makes it feel like, I'm so lucky to be able to do all of this stuff. Because when it doesn't feel that way, I either readjust my vision or I cut that client or project out of my life. And this is how you prune and tend to the garden of the movie screen that plays out as your perception. So let's talk about some of the other concepts remember, we're going through The Nature of Personal Reality by Jane Roberts. This is a brilliant book that where she channels an entity, oversoul, called Seth, who's helping us understand how reality brings itself together. So I'm going to take a quick drink of water. One of the things that we have to recognize in order to really buy into this belief system is that time is illusion. And one of the things that Seth teaches is about the nature of time, and that time is actually a non-linear concept. So the best explanation that I have for time is that if you think about a film reel moves at 24 frames per second. And so when you have a film reel in your hand, you pull out the film strip, you hold it up to the light, and you see that each frame of the film strip is a still photo. It's not moving. There's no motion there. It's a still photo. But when you move that film reel at a fast enough rate with light projecting through it, you create the illusion of motion. And that's essentially what consciousness does with reality. It is a bunch of essentially still frame holographic images of the entire universe. And in each billionth of a second, there's a frame rate where that entire hologram is getting re-rendered. And time is just the linear path that we take through all of those different pieces. So if you imagine a million dominoes that are all stacked up, and those million dominoes are going to fall over depending on which angle you tip the first domino. So if I tip it forward, the dominoes in front of me are going to fall forward. If I slightly turn it to the right, the million dominoes that are going to fall are going to be to the left. Well, all of the million dominoes that are set up act as the potential that's available to me. I have to use my consciousness and my focus and my emotions to point the domino towards the timeline, the series of probabilities that will then engage and I will then perceive as my reality. And so one of the things that Seth talks about is how we can collapse time and how really the past, the present, and the future all exist at the same time. Because if I'm looking at a million dominoes and I'm here at the first domino, well, all of these future potentials exist out here a million dominoes away from me. And so in this way, there's a kind of, it's not predetermination, but it is something that gets talked about in the Bible where it's basically like God has created everything. And so it's something like all of the potentials that could ever be experienced exist as an energetic potential. But there's not predetermination because it's our free will choice to determine what route we take through all of those different dominoes. And because we get to determine the route, and the part that fails in the domino metaphor is that because past, present, and future, basically the potentials that we lived in the past, the dominoes in the future, and the domino that we're on right now, these all exist at the same time. And so what Seth talks about is how we can actually visualize the past being differently, and we will have a different emotional relationship with the past and potentially even change the way that the past shows up. So you may have heard of things like the mandala effect, where it's this idea that there are certain things from our past that we remember one way, like the Fruit of the Loom logo having like a cornucopia in it. It doesn't actually have that, but everybody remembers it having that. Sinbad being in a movie, forget what is it called, some genie movie that he says he wasn't actually in. The Bernstein Bears, the spelling of that being different. They just search mandala effect and you'll find all of these. I guess it comes from a lot of people remember that Nelson Mandela died in jail when actually he didn't, and so these are all experiences of fractals in time kind of rendering themselves differently than we perceived. And so the idea that Seth puts forward is that we can actually visualize that our past was different, and this at a minimum will reconstruct the emotional belief systems that we have about ourselves, because what we learn from all psychologists is that we basically build our worldview and our emotional relationship with ourselves from years 1 to 7. Well, if you had poor parents, or if you had bad parents, or if you had parents that just didn't know what they were doing, or they were abusive to you, God forbid, these all get mapped into your nervous system. And so one of the things that we can do to heal is revisit those things, feel through the big feelings that we probably didn't have the tools or nervous system to fully process when we were a child, process through all of that, and then visualize it differently, see it from a different perspective, we know what we don't want. How would it have, what would we have preferred? And so if we had a parent that was verbally abusive to us, then maybe as a thought experiment, we visualize them saying kind things to us and being loving to us. And what is this going to do? Almost always, if somebody had a really bad childhood and you present this idea to them, they will have deep resistance towards it because they actually are holding a grudge against their parent. They don't want to visualize their parent as being a good person because they have so much resentment towards them, and it's almost like they view their resentment as a weapon that's punishing them. And so what this exercise does, when you start to visualize the past differently than it happened, so of course you want to feel through that resentment. You want to feel through the grief that's there. Oh, my mom didn't know how to love me. My dad didn't know how to love me. Whatever's there, you really feel through that to the point where you can look at that situation without being emotionally triggered. And you'll know that you're no longer emotionally triggered because then you'll be able to do this next part. Then you visualize a parent who was loving to you, who did say what you want. And this is you reparenting yourself. You're visualizing the past differently in order to build out a different relationship with your nervous system that allows you to have the experience and the nervous system and the muscle memory of somebody who was loved by their parents. And this will be wildly beneficial for you in the present moment and future, because everything stems from the emotional biases that we have. And if we have deep, unprocessed resentment towards our childhood or our past, or if we have just big pockets of blackness where we can't even think about our past because we went out of body and we don't even want to think about it, it's living under the unconscious surface, and it's affecting the way that reality renders around us. And so if we start to visualize the past differently, we can reparent our nervous system in such a way that we will be able to more effectively then manage our thoughts and emotions from a deeper foundational place of who we are as self. And so the nature of time is illusory in this way, because the way that we think about causality isn't actually how it is. Causality exists because of an emotional inheritance. We didn't process something that we should have processed in the present moment. And so then that energy gets stuck in our nervous system. And when that energy gets stuck in our nervous system, it becomes a part of the satellite dish that we're using to render and perceive reality. And so until we tend to that trapped trauma or energy, we're going to be unable to move past it and render beyond the ability that we had at that moment of shock in our past. And so in this way, all of us can heal the past by healing it in the present moment. And this is why, the culture wars and the things that we see that are, putting a light on the past in some ways serve because we should all recognize our place in those things and feel through our big feelings about what has happened in the past. We no longer want to be contributing unconscious energy to something that is unloving. And yet, if we're doing that from a place of making other people wrong, from a place of resentment, from a place of demanding external reward or reparation or whatever it is, rather than internal peace, then we're missing the forest for the trees. Because the true ability of history and reflecting on the past is, okay, we know what didn't work now. So what would have been better? And let me steal my focus towards what would have been better instead of constantly driving home the chip on the shoulder, the resentment about what happened in the past. Remember, what we perceive is what we're giving energy to, and where attention goes, energy flows. And so if we are stuck in the past on any topic, we are recreating that past in the present moment. And this gets into one of the next things that's talked about in The Nature of Personal Reality by Jane Roberts. And this is Seth talking about your inner and outer senses. So the outer senses are the things that we've been taught by science, allow us to perceive the physical world: taste, touch, sight. What are the other ones? Hearing. To some extent, this could be our third eye, although that's getting a little bit more into the inner senses. Any of our senses that we're using to engage with the world around us is more of a materialistic view of reality. We're recognizing all of these things around us that we're sensing as separate from us, when actually everything that we engage with, everything that we perceive is our dream. We are the dreamer that is creating everything. We are lending our consciousness and energy onto the movie screen of our personal reality in order to get a experience of these things. And so while everybody on this call that's tuned in, everybody in the world is oftentimes perceiving the same things, we're all perceiving it from our own biases, from our own emotional makeup. And there's the hard part to get your brain around is there's not one world that we all live on. There's a radio signal that represents the potentiality of the world that we're all tuned into. So think about when you're playing like a multiplayer game on Xbox. So you log in to Call of Duty or whatever the game is, and all of a sudden you're playing with your friend down the street. Now, you are both rendering the same world on different machines. So is it the same world? You're able to interact in the same world, but you're using the power from your house to build the world that you're running around in the video game, and he's using the power from his house to run around in the world of his video game. So you're dialed into the same data set of the world, but the world isn't actually a place that either of you are in. You're using the power of your home and the technology of your Xbox in order to spin up an instance of that world and then to run around in that. And that's essentially how consciousness works. That's how physical reality is rendered, is that when we wake up in the morning, we're logging in to the Xbox of a multiplayer game that just happens to have billions of players. And so everything that we perceive is us building the world from our own technology. And so we're all tapping into the same data sets and we're rendering things in a very similar way, but there's also biases and differences, and this is our personal reality, and this is our ability to shift that reality because when there are things that only we are perceiving, oftentimes this is the way that we think about ourselves. When it comes down to things that only we can perceive, we have massive control over those things. But also, two people can be looking at the same data set, and remember those million dominoes that are laid out. One person is going to turn their domino to the right, and one person is going to turn their domino to the left. And the person on the right hits the solution, and the person on the left doesn't. Why? They both were rendering the same reality of dominoes. So why did one person turn to the left and one person turn to the right? It's because the person that turned to the right was psychically connected in some way to the future solution out here on the right. And so they turned their domino towards that, and they recognized, okay, this is the linear path of dominoes that I need to hit in order to get to this place. And maybe within this domino set, there are power-ups where if you hit a certain certain domino, it's a green domino, and that green domino jumps you ahead 1,000 dominoes. And so quantum reality has all kinds of things embedded in this. And so it's not that we're looking at a different world. It's that our attention is going to be drawn to a different part of the data set that matches our deepest desires and passions, and reflects to us, gives us experiences that are designed to showcase where we have stagnated emotional energy in our system. We've talked, many times on this channel before about how reality acts as an acupuncture needle. And what a good acupuncturist does is they identify where there's stuck energy in your meridian line, and then they place a needle right where the energy is stuck in order to draw conscious energy to that place. Pain in the body is actually just a signal for resources to come to the spot of pain. And so acupuncture takes advantage of the fact that your body moves towards pain, and it creates a tiny little pring that draws conscious attention to that area and opens up the flow of energy through that meridian line. Well, what reality acts in the same way. It says, ooh, this person has something from their childhood that is totally, it's preventing them from pointing the domino in the right way. They keep throwing that domino to the left, and really everything that they want is to the right. So I'm going to render an experience that helps them reorient towards the dominoes on the right. but it's going to be temporarily painful for them because just like the acupuncture needle, it's designed to draw resources and to open up the satellite of possibility to them where they're just tuned in enough where they can see the next thing that's slightly to the right, and then they can see the next thing that's slightly to the right. And then if they keep just having these slight moments where they move slightly to the right, pretty soon they are able to be on the path of dominoes that's moving to the right towards the thing that they want. But it happens in a breadcrumb path, in a domino collapsing type of way. And our inner and outer senses are the things that allow us to properly navigate the physical world and the subjective world. And what Seth proposes is that the entire world is subjective. And so we should really be overclocking into dialing in our inner senses. And this is where we get silent with ourselves. We get still with ourselves. We feel what's happening in our body. We feel our big feelings fully. We get to a place where we can look at whatever's in front of us without being triggered by it. And from that place of nuance, we then say, okay, now I know what I didn't want. What is it that I do want? And we build out a story, a vision, a simulation that we can walk around in that is the ideal thing that we want. And what happens is we grow the strength of our satellite dish, our inner, and what I'm calling our satellite dish is our inner senses. So we grow our inner senses to know where is the domino that we want to hit. What direction is it pointed towards? Okay, now that we know what direction it's pointed towards, what's the very next domino that I need to do to get there? Sometimes that's reading a book. Sometimes it's taking a course. Sometimes it's quitting your job. Sometimes it's staying at your job and feeling your big feelings about it. Sometimes it's taking more personal responsibility for the things in your life. In AA, we used to call it cleaning up your side of the street. These are all ways that you more effectively choose dominoes that are pointed in the direction that you want to point. Now, if your domino is up and to the right, you know, kind of like a dog leg in golf, you can have a domino that is slightly pointed to the left but moves you forward, and then you can reorient yourself just like when you're playing golf, and now you can move towards the right from that position. So it doesn't mean that you have to take a straight line to where you go, but the opportunity is to use your intuition and your inner senses and that satellite dish of your perception to know what the straightest possible path is. And that's what feels like collapsing time. That's what feels like magic. That's what feels like synchronicity. Because when you're on the most direct route to what you want, it feels like magic because the dominoes are falling so fast. Just because you're not seeing synchronicity all the time doesn't mean that you're not on your path, that you're not making nominal distance towards where you want to go. It's just that you might be slightly off kilter from the fastest route that's available to you. And this brings up probable realities. So I think the domino analogy that I put forth is probably a good way to think about probable realities. So everything that could possibly happen to you exists as a domino. And our job is to use our inner and outer senses to navigate which dominoes actually fall over, which is our consciousness moving through the film reel and playing out what our universe actually is. And so what Seth talks about is there's all of these probabilities for every possible thing. There's a probability where I did this video wearing a purple shirt. There's a probability where this call, where President Trump joins in on this call, and there's a probability where Kamala Harris jumps in on this call, and there's a probability, where Jesus Christ comes back to Earth and joins in on a Twitter space to announce that he's returned. These are all probabilities that exist somewhere as a potential, but is there a likelihood to them? So just like in mathematics, when you're looking at probabilities, when you're standing in the field of dominoes, let's call it, these are all the probable realities that are available to you. Millions of dominoes that are all stacked up, and this is you being able to literally do anything that you want to do. However, if you're visualizing that you bring J.R.R. Tolkien's book, the Hobbit, to life, and that you get to go and live in that world, In theory, that exists as a probable reality, but it's so wildly over here to the right. It's hundreds of trillions of dominoes away, that you would have to likely become some kind of a monastic master where you're able to exit the probabilities of this physical potential and live in your astral body in order to build that world. And when you read channeled text as often as I read, all the time you hear about these entities that are essentially living in these virtual spiritual worlds that are akin to these kind of different societies. And I believe that in our spirit body, we can create any of those things. And so if you wanted to have that experience, you could have it. But one of the choices that you made as a soul, or that you in co-creationship with God agreed to, was that you were going to use the probabilities of physical reality to individuate yourself and actually determine what it is that you want. And so in order to have the most optimal experience of collapsing time, you want to properly assess what are the probabilities that are actually within the vicinity of what we call your decision space. So even though there's, an infinite number of probabilities that we can choose, there's probably only like 10 things that we're likely to choose. And each of these dominoes, which is a choice, has a probability associated with it. So in this moment, it's probably like 99% that I'm going to continue this space, and maybe 1% that I turn it off. Maybe there's a 1% that, or a couple percentage points that I take a drink of water. So it's looking at the current circumstances, it's looking at the current momentum of choices that I'm making, and it's basically ordering those dominoes, essentially like making certain dominoes bigger, and by being bigger, they're more probable to fall and knock down all the things behind them. And so one thing that we're doing when we visualize a future that we want is we're basically growing the dominoes or lighting up the dominoes that serve that path, so that we can orient towards which direction, what the next thing in the breadcrumb path is. So hopefully that makes probable realities a little bit easier. You hear a lot in science fiction about going to a different dimension where everything is the same except for this one thing. And I don't think that reality is so inefficient that it's actually rendering all of these things as separate realities. I think what it's rendering it as is potential in the consciousness simulation, where if you decide to hold a strong enough vision for a reality, it then raises the potential and the probability that domino will eventually fall. And in this way, you, as the conscious being, get to decide which probabilities get actualized and which probabilities remain dormant. And that's part of what being a conscious creator is. It's not that you created the life experience. God created all of the life experience, but you are watering it in such a way. That's the right way to think about it. So it's like a seed. So God already created the seeds for literally everything that could ever happen. But it's up to us as the conscious decider to determine which of those seeds get watered and ultimately what grows out of that seed. So let's talk about health and body, since we're talking about watering yourself. And we know that the earth is 71% water. Our bodies should be close to 71% water. Emotional energy moves through water most effectively. And we're grossly dehydrated as a human population on this planet. Typically, people have 45 to 65% water in their body. 71% would be optimal to match that of the planet. And so however much water we're drinking, we should be drinking more. I try to aim for 5 to 6 liters of water a day. I don't always hit it because it's hard to drink that much water. However, when you drink that much water, the radio signals that we're talking about, the emotional energy that you need to tune into, the dominoes that you need to take as the next step in your path, that's all going to light up more vividly if you're properly hydrated. So with that said, I'm going to take a drink of water. And when we are hydrated, we have a much deeper awareness about what's happening in our body. One of the reasons that we want to get really still in our body is that every ailment that happens in our physical body starts at the soul level. There's an incongruency between our soul and our desire. So when we start to move away from the truth of our true soul desire, what happens is error enters our soul, and that manifests in the spirit body as it renders incorrectly. It's an injury in the injury. It's an incoherence in the way that energy flows. And so that first thing in our spirit body, in our energy body, and in our emotional body showcases that we aren't on our true path. We aren't on the straightest path towards our true desire. If we were, that incoherence wouldn't be there. And so when we sit still, we can catch some of these things in their very subtle stages while they're still in the emotional and spiritual or energetic form before they have to manifest as a physical ailment. But what happens is if we ignore them at the emotional level, if we ignore them at the spiritual and energetic level, now it's like the signal has to get bigger. Abraham Hicks says all the time, if there's a problem in your life, don't worry, it'll get bigger. And this is reality, God's way of showcasing to us where we are off track from our purest desires, where we have energy that is that is no longer in coherence with the ultimate plan that our greatest desires and passions are pointing towards. And so if we don't tend to that at those subtle levels, then it starts to manifest as disease. And there's a really great book called The Complete Dictionary of Ailments and Diseases. And what this book does is it allows you to look up any physical ailment, and it will show you the underlying emotional root of that ailment so that you can fix it at the emotional level where it's actually being manifested. Unfortunately, our entire medical system is based on allopathic care and treating symptoms. And while that provides temporary relief sometimes, it almost always comes with side effects, and it is very rarely getting to the root cause, which is always an emotional or energetic cause, a spiritual cause. And so if you look, you can look up anything in this book. So if we right now, I just turned to heart myocarditis. So we know that a lot of people, a lot of healthy athletes are having myocarditis carditis attacks right now. And so this would give a reason why they might have attracted that at an emotional level, because no matter what you think caused the myocarditis, the reason that you manifested it, yes, there may be physical things there that you could attribute to it, but it's never the physical thing that caused it. It's always that you left the emotional potential open where that physical thing could then manifest. And so, yes, we could trace it back to, X, Y, and Z caused this thing, but really, and so then it's like, well, why did this person not have it happen, but this person did? It's because that person opened up the probability for that particular physical disease because there was an emotional root that they hadn't paid attention to. So for this one, it says, I don't feel in full control of my capabilities. I'm afraid my heart will give out, or that my heart isn't solid enough properly as well as figuratively understood. I have a very strong mind and I don't know how to manage my emotions. So there's a huge paragraph there that explains what this is. But what you would take from that is this is somebody that's overclocked into their mind, which is almost everybody in our current Western society. They're overclocked into their physical mind and to their physical experiences, and they're not in tune with their heart, which is the soul, which is the true desires. And so when we aren't allowing space for our true desires and passions to get expression, we build up error in our soul that then starts to manifest as these physical things. And so what Seth teaches in Jane Roberts' The Nature of Personal Reality is that all physical ailments are pointing to a negative belief or emotional condition that we need to tend to. And when we tend to that, we will reverse the condition. And so the easiest way, whether you have that book that shows you the specific emotions or not, the easiest way to tend to your own physical health is to set a timer for 15 to 30 minutes every single day. Take a few deep breaths. and then you want to just tune in to what sensations are present in your body, in your nervous system. Your body is so good at releasing trauma from itself. It is so good at presenting to you what needs to be addressed. And all you do is you don't judge any feeling as good or bad, as being negative or positive. You just notice what's happening in your body. So maybe there's some tension in your stomach. Maybe that creates like an energetic sensation of darting up to your heart. As you lend curiosity to what's happening in your body every single day, your body will naturally resolve these things at the emotional soul level, at the spirit body level, and it will not have to manifest as physical ailment or disease. And so this can be just doing this body scan every single day can be one of the best things that you do to avoid any of the things that they try to scare you about. I'm not going to say them out loud because I don't want the algorithm to ding this video, but you know what you're being scared into believing is going to affect you at the physical level. And those things can only affect you or only have meaningful effect on you if you're afraid of them and if you're not tending to your emotional body on a regular basis. It doesn't mean that you're not going to manifest those things, but it does mean that you'll be able to very clearly move through those things and they won't be a big deal for you. All right. So the other way that you can kind of tend to what's happening in your unconscious is by looking at your dreams and their role in your life. And in the nature of personal reality, Seth talks about how when you're overclocked into the mental side and not as tapped into your intuition, you can start, it's sometimes most easy to start a relationship with your dreams. And so before you go to bed at night, on a sheet of paper, you write, I will remember my dreams tonight, and my soul or God or my spirit team is going to communicate what I need to know in my dreams. Or if you have a specific problem or question that you want solved, you can write that question down. And then as you go to sleep, you can say, I expect to receive an answer to this question in my dreams. And then when you wake up in the morning, you want to start a habit of journaling what were your dreams about? And so your dreams are important from a linear perspective, because oftentimes you're going to bring in symbolism, and we'll look at that here in a second. But really, you just stream of consciousness want to write down what happened. Don't try to interpret it right away, because you might miss some of the details. We lose the details of our dreams very quickly. So what I always try to do is just stream of consciousness on a sheet of paper. I just write down as much as I can remember about the dream without trying to give it any interpretation. And then I try to write down, what did I feel about those things? Because oftentimes the feeling is the more important part, because our dreams are just our thoughts are always just showing us what we need to feel and process through. But then what I like to do is I like to then take a photo of what I wrote down in my journal as that dream, and I go to ChatGPT, and if you're on the YouTube live stream, you can see what I'm doing. And basically what you can do to get this prompt is in ChatGPT, you can type, what are all the different systems for interpreting dreams? It's going to give you all these different ones: Freudian interpretation, Jungian interpretation, cognitive perspective, problem solving theory, activation synthesis theory, memory consolidation, symbolic and archetypical, shamanic interpretation, prophetic and divinatory dreams. There's tons of them. And so then what you do is you say, write a prompt that allows me to enter a transcript of a dream that I had, and then provides an interpretation via each of these systems. And so then it's going to spit out this thing that you can basically save as a GPT or just copy into your notes file. And it's essentially going to be a prompt that gives you all of these interpretations. And then you can decide which interpretations have the most meaning to you on a regular basis. And you can remove any of the ones that you don't particularly like. So I'll go ahead and do a dream interpretation right now, so you can see what this looks like. So I can paste this in, and then where it says dream transcript input box, I can type in, I had a dream where I was flying, and as I reached the top of my circular path, I would then joyously fall and let gravity pull me towards the ground. This is an actual dream I had. And then when I was about to hit to hit the ground, I would pull up like pulling out of a tailspin and joyously fly upwards again. Okay, so then I submit this in this prompt and let's see what gets spit out. So it gives me the Freudian interpretation. The act of flying in your dream may represent a desire for freedom and escape from certain constraints in your life. The circular path could symbolize a cycle of tension and release, possibly indicating repressed emotions or unresolved conflicts that you're navigating. The joyful experience of pulling up just before hitting the ground might suggest a release of anxiety or fear, symbolizing a resolution of those inner conflicts. So you can see these dream interpretation are hit or miss, but one of the reasons that we want to interpret it from a bunch of different angles is because some of them are going to resonate more with us than others, and this can be a really effective way for us to understand what our unconscious mind is trying to communicate with us. So the Jungian interpretation is flying is often associated with the archetype of transcendence or spiritual ascent. The circular path might represent the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, a journey towards individuation and self-realization. The joyful fall and recovery could symbolize the balance between letting go and regaining control, reflecting a deeper integration of your conscious and unconscious mind. So this kind of resonates with me because really what I am practicing in my life is, okay, let me let go and let God, get the inspiration, and then gain control again so that I can have the joyous hands in the clay experience of bringing something about. And so maybe what that dream was telling me was that, okay, you're on the right path, and as you let go, you're going to get all of this momentum, and then you're going to take control, and you're going to be able to direct all of that momentum. So I won't read through all these interpretations, but this can be a really fun way for you to interpret your dreams. And then something that I like to do is then I'll say, rewrite the best parts of these dream interpretations into a personal essay written by, and then you list whoever one of your favorite authors are. So maybe since we're doing Jane Roberts, we say Jane Roberts. And then what it's going to do is it's going to take all this information and it's going to write an essay. And this can be a really fun way to learn about yourself, because the input is your dream. It's your subconscious. So it says, the joy of flying, a journey through consciousness. In the landscape of dreams, I often find myself navigating worlds that are both intimately familiar and profoundly alien. Dreams to me are not just the subconscious mind's playground. They are windows into deeper realms of existence where the self is free to explore the vastness of its own consciousness. I recently dreamt of flying, a sensation that many have described, but that always feels uniquely personal in its experience to me. In this dream, I was soaring through the sky, tracing a circular path with a rhythm that was both exhilarating and comforting. Each time I reached the peak of my ascent, I would allow myself to joyously fall, surrendering to gravity's pull, only to pull up just before hitting the ground and soar upwards again with a renewed sense of vitality. This dream, like so many others, is more than a simple narrative. It's a reflection of the soul's journey, a mirror of our inner selves navigating the complexities of life. In the act of flying, I recognize the archetype of transcendence, a symbol of the soul's desire to rise above the mundane and touch the divine. The circular path represents the cyclical nature of existence, where each ascent and descent is part of a larger pattern, a dance between the highs and lows of life. So I won't read the whole thing. You can do this for yourself, but this is such a joyous experience of being able to have your own unconscious mind reflected to you in the voice of your favorite author. I just love this as a use case for taking what Seth talks about in dreams and their role in our life and really bringing AI into it to give us a much deeper, meaningful experience with our own dreams. This plays into the next thing that's taught in the nature of personal reality, which is the role of the subconscious. And the subconscious mind plays a crucial role in shaping reality. We've already talked a lot about that in this presentation. And it's those deep-seated beliefs and emotions that ultimately determine what renders on the movie screen of the video game that we're playing. And so we need to have deep conscious awareness of our subconscious, and we can do this by journaling. We can do this through the dream reflection that I just talked about. We can do this by working with a coach. I have several coaches that I work with every single week to help reflect things back to me. Or you can practice this with your significant other or a good friend, where you have an agreement that, hey, right now I want you to reflect back to me what you see and hear. I used to be a part of a group called Authentic Relating, and Authentic Relating, you would share, basically there's a circle, somebody would be in the mush pot in the center, and you would share something about yourself, and then everybody in the circle would tell you what they were feeling and experience about it, or what they were perceiving about what you just said. And it was this really interesting way to get feedback from reality. Now, sometimes you had to feel your big feelings, but that was your law of attraction that called in that information. And so those feelings, because it was a safe place, because everybody agreed to those terms, that was a really interesting way to reflect your unconscious beliefs back to you. And then sometimes somebody would say something and you'd be like, oh, that's their stuff. And sometimes you'd be like, ooh, that really struck a nerve. And so in the same way, you can use ChatGPT. I love uploading my journal, my handwritten journal entries. I just take a photograph and upload it into ChatGPT. And I will run it through dream interpretation, or I will say, ask it for emotional sentiment, or I will say, turn this into an article that teaches me something about myself, or an essay that teaches me something about myself. Do it in the style of my favorite author. This is such a fun way to learn about yourself and to have a deep insight into who you are as a conscious creator. And this is going to make you better at manifesting reality, because it is the unconscious things, the things that you have blinders to, that prevent you from being the best creator, that prevent you from seeing all of the potential dominoes that are available for you to knock over. And this goes into embracing the self. You know, Seth talks all the time about we have to love ourselves. We have to accept ourselves. And so if you have deep emotional wounds from your childhood, like we spoke about, you're going to be creating from a disadvantage, and you want to give yourself every edge that you can. And so by sitting still with yourself, by feeling your big feelings, by transmuting the discomfort in your body into creative potential that you can then interpret, you're going to have a much more loving relationship with yourself. You're going to learn how to reparent yourself. And this ultimately is going to allow you to have better outcomes in the reality around you. The last couple of things that we'll talk about, the eternal nature of the soul. So if you've never come across spiritual content, you may not have an understanding of you as a spirit, as a soul. And one of the things that I think is interesting about Gnostic teachings, or what I think Jesus in the Bible was trying to showcase to us, is that there wasn't really a strong belief system, you know, during that time, that there was an afterworld, or that you had a continuity of life. And so people just thought that you kind of died and that was it. And so that this was the life that you lived. And what Christ came in to showcase was, hey, you keep living. You're not your physical body anymore, but you continue as a spiritual body, and your soul is still in control of it. And so your lessons go on forever and ever and ever. And Seth kind of mirrors this idea of the eternal nature of a soul, where when we die, we just go into the spirit realms, and now we have a shift of perspective, but we're still us. We're still the consciousness that is us, and we then have these relationships with what Seth calls oversouls, and this is where, to some extent, I differ on the nature of reality. But you know, Seth believes that you know, we basically have this kind of Russian doll type experience with all of these different souls, and what he describes as an oversoul, or what Jane Roberts interpreted as being an oversoul, which is basically this soul that has all of these aspects of itself that are then incarnated onto the planet in these different timelines. And so this is what people call past lives. What I would say is that it's actually that these messages were kind of on a daisy chain of a bunch of separate souls that were trying to communicate a message from higher realms. And so they kind of, like Russian dolls, daisy chained themselves from these higher realms down into these lower realms until Jane Roberts could interpret them. That's my interpretation. That's certainly not what the book teaches. You can let me know what you think in the comments of this video. But regardless, this idea that we have a spirit body, that we're a spiritual being, and that we're a soul really helps us on our path to manifestation, because it gives us a construct for recognizing causally where everything is created from. And so when we can tend to our soul, our true soul desires and passions, when we can live those wholly and authentically and in deep expression, that's when we're going to have the greatest ability to line up all the right dominoes. And then the last thing is just that we have free will and we have responsibility to create reality the way that we see fit. So we can choose anything. We can choose any domino. That's the free will that has been gifted to us by God, by reality itself. But once we recognize that anything that we're perceiving, we're lending energy to, we have to learn how to work with that. And we do that by feeling our big feelings about anything that triggers us, and by using anything that we see as a jumping off point to then visualize what we would prefer. And by doing that, we lend more energy to the world that we want to see than the world that we don't. And we become a tangible impact on rendering the video game that we're all tuned into and playing. And almost always we're paying more attention to what's right in front of us. If we're in really bad shape, we're paying attention only to the negative things that happen to us. And we create a self-fulfilling prophecy that consistently shows us more of that. If you're constantly yelling at the TV screen, guess what? You're going to just get more of that. Somebody who is looking to build out optimal outcomes is going to say, oh, good, I know what I don't want now. So what is the positive opposite of that? Let me put more attention on the positive opposite than what I'm seeing right in front of me, because that's going to show me how I can show up and have a tangible impact on this that moves me in the direction of the positive impact that I want to have on the world. And the more that we visualize the world that we want and our role in it, the more that physical reality will call us into a main character position. And that's when we can be really impactful. So the practical applications taught in the nature of personal reality are self-examination. We talked about several ways to do that. Visualization, emotional awareness, which is just sitting with yourself so that you know what's happening in your emotional body. You're catching it in the subtle level. Dream work, which we talked about, and affirmations. Affirmations can be used saying something out loud. The way that I like to use it is I like to build a world. I like to spin up a consciousness simulated idea of the world that I want and walk around in that. I like to use a concept that Neville Goddard taught called revision, where at night as I'm going to sleep, I remember my day the way that I wanted it to go. So I remember getting up, I remember taking these calls, but if there was something that I didn't like, I feel through any big feelings that I still have about that. But then I'm like, oh, how cool would it have been if they had said this to me, if they had done this, if this outcome had happened, if that person then happened it. And what I'm doing is, instead of giving all of my energy to what's happening right now, instead of being a realist where well, the only thing that's happening is what's happening, I acknowledge that it happened. I feel my big feelings about what happened, but then I imagine it differently. And what I'm doing is, in the future, I'm calling in things that are more congruent with the new version that I just remembered rather than the old version. And so this is how I use affirmations. The other way is I say, what type of person that am I? So for me, sometimes it can be hard for me to be like, I'm going to have $1 million by the end of the day, because one, that phrasing of that always puts it in the future. And so you're always keeping the end result out ahead of you. The way that I like to use affirmations is, what type of person would have $1 million? I'm gonna be that right now. So I say, I'm somebody who's a good steward of money. I'm somebody who's a good steward of the energy that's given to me. I'm the type of person that reality just constantly gives opportunity to. I'm the type of person that hits grand slams, that lands on the right idea. I'm the type of person that lines up the dominoes correctly. So So my affirmations are what type of person that I am, because that's something that I can believe right now. You know what? I am that type of person. And what this does is it tunes my field to call in, to light up the dominoes in a way where I will pick the most optimal path to collapse time and get where I want to go. But the thing that always trips us up when it comes to manifestation and affirmations is that if it doesn't happen right away, we start to doubt that it's working. Whatever happens next after you do this affirmation work, after you have that visualization, is the breadcrumb path that's helping you fine-tune your nervous system so that you can become somebody who can actually have the thing that you want, who is capable of holding the thing that you want. And so whatever's happening next, you feel your big feelings about it. You use it as a way to say, good, I know what I don't want. Here's what I would prefer. You give more energy to what you prefer than what's actually happening. And in this way, you slowly start to find the most optimal path towards your desires and the things that you want. So I highly encourage the entire Seth series. The Seth books are so awesome. I've read these so many times. This is one of my favorite books. Jane Roberts and the relationship that she had with her husband was so interesting, and also kind of tragic because Seth was giving her such interesting information and she wasn't able to utilize it in her own life because she was someone that this is my own personal opinion, and so this isn't from the book, but I believe that she was too rooted in the spirit of, I need to be the change. I'm going to be a change maker. This is the way it is. These are the injustices in the world. And she couldn't allow herself to release some of that emotional resentment and ideas towards the way things are. She couldn't believe that maybe parts of science weren't real. And because of that, she suffered deep physical error in her body and ultimately died. And it was really sad because ultimately she was the one that was bringing the Seth material through. And Robert Butts, who was very involved in the creation of all of these books, never had access to Seth again. So again, it's one of those things where the message is beautiful. And because she was ahead of her time, she didn't have a good model for how to implement it into the physical world. And I think that we have a lot more content. The Abraham Hicks work, the divine truth work, somatic experiencing and somatic therapy. All of these things, I think, give greater context to the nature of personal reality by Seth, channeled by Jane Roberts. And I've tried to bring some of that additional context into this master guide and into this video so that you can read this book, read along with this book, or if you've already read this book, maximize the things that are put forth in this content. So that's going to be it for me. Let me see if there's anything in the chat. Honor the Quest says, The Wizard, love the audiobooks. I have Nature of Reality, Seth Speaks, and Magical Approach. I appreciate you, my friend. Good to see you over that you found this account the other day. I remember you from the Musing Wizard days, and I'm glad that you found my account over at John Ray, which leads me to a personal plug. If you haven't followed me on Twitter, head on over to x.com/John Ray. I'd love to have a follow. I do a live stream there every day at 3 p.m. That is simulcast to YouTube. This video will ultimately get broken down into clips that you can see on the YouTube timeline. And if you resonate with anything in this, I would love a share, a follow, or for you to come up on stage in one of these conversations and use the chat to be a part of the conversation. So I appreciate Entheox and Kazi for tuning in over on the Twitter side. If you want to come up and say anything, now would be the time. Otherwise, I think we will go ahead and wrap this thing up. Let me know in the comments, what did you think about this book? What did you think about this interpretation? Have you read the book? If not, are you going to read it? Writing a meaningful comment on the live stream helps the algorithm determine who this content goes out to. KSC, I see you just joined the Twitter chat, but we're winding it down. So for now, I'm John Ray, and we will see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central Time. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Bye, y'all.